Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Preeti Kaur. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, Ukraine President Zelensky agrees to halt attacks on Russia's energy network and infrastructure. Israel extends ground operations in Gaza after deadly airstrikes. US says bridge proposal on the table to extend ceasefire and release of hostages. Turkey detains mayor and President Erdogan's main election rival over graft and terrorism allegations, sparking protests. Fed holds interest rates already steady as it waits for Trump economic policy to take hold, sees slower growth, expect 2 cuts coming this year. A critical phone call took place between US President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, marking the first conversation since their tense exchange in the Oval Office last month. The two leaders discussed several key issues, including a potential ceasefire with Russia, military support for Ukraine, and future cooperation on nuclear energy. The call comes amid ongoing violence and military operations in Ukraine. DD India's Aarti Rana gets us more.
The White House said Presidents Trump and Zelensky had a fantastic phone call toward ending Russia-Ukraine conflict. The conversation was a positive step forward after tense exchange earlier this year.
President Zelensky asked for additional air defense systems to protect his civilians, particularly Patriot missile systems, and President Trump agreed to work with him to find what was available, particularly in Europe. The two leaders also agreed on a partial ceasefire against energy. Technical teams will meet in Saudi Arabia in the coming days to discuss broadening the ceasefire to the Black Sea on the way to a full ceasefire.
One of the most significant developments from the call was the discussion of a potential ceasefire, but Ukraine claims that Russia is still unwilling to commit to peace. Future cooperation, particularly in regard to Ukraine's energy infrastructure, was also discussed.
There was a question about the nuclear power plant. There was no question about the network of nuclear power plants. The question was exclusively about the plant that is under temporary occupation. It's in danger because Russia is dominating it with weapons, and it's not working because Russia has absolutely illegally held it and occupied it.
As agreed in a call between Trump and Putin, Russia and Ukraine engaged in a prisoner exchange, with 175 troops released by each side. This exchange also included 22 additional wounded Ukrainian soldiers freed by Moscow as a goodwill gesture. Meanwhile, European leaders have expressed concerns about Trump's approach to the conflict, but Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban believes that EU must back Trump to get a peace deal. The focus now firmly shifts to Jeddah, where a new round of talks between Russian and US officials is scheduled to take place this Sunday. The talks will aim to work out the technical details of a permanent ceasefire. Aarti Rana's report for DD India.
The European Council summit will convene on Thursday in Brussels. Heads of state and government of the 27 member states, as well as EU Council President Antonio Costa, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, and the bloc's foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas will participate in the summit. Several critical topics reflecting current geopolitical and economic priorities are expected to be discussed during the two-day summit. The agenda includes discussions on the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, with a particular focus on the bloc's continued support for Ukraine, especially amid heightened tensions and the need for security guarantees. The summit comes after a busy period of diplomacy, with the EU leaders aiming to respond to shifting transatlantic dynamics and regional challenges. European defense will also be a key point, with leaders likely to explore ways to boost capabilities and address funding, possibly in light of a forthcoming EU white paper on defense. The Israeli military has resumed ground operations in the central and southern Gaza Strip, and its operations extended Israel's control over the Netzarim corridor, which bisects Gaza. The Israeli military operations were focused maneuver aimed at creating a partial buffer zone between the north and the south of the enclave. The renewed ground operations come a day after more than 400 Palestinians were killed in airstrikes in one of the deadliest episodes since the beginning of the conflict in October 2023, shattering a ceasefire that has largely held since January. The U.S. State Department blamed Hamas for the resumption of hostilities and said that there was still a U.S.-crafted bridge proposal on the table to extend the ceasefire and bring about the release of the hostages held by the group in Gaza. The renewed violence was condemned by some Western nations, including France and Germany, as well as Qatar and Egypt, which had been acting as mediators in the ceasefire negotiations. French President Emmanuel Macron spoke with Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and both the leaders condemned the resumption of Israeli strikes on Gaza. Macron said that they will co-chair a conference on a two-state solution aimed at helping revive a political perspective for both Israelis and Palestinians. Macron also said that he welcomed the Crown Prince Jeddah initiative, which enabled the start of the peace negotiations in Ukraine. U.S. President Donald Trump said on Wednesday that Iran must immediately stop sending military supplies to the Houthis and let the Yemeni group fight it out themselves. In a post on Truth Social, Trump added that U.S. strikes on the Houthis will get progressively worse and that they will be completed annihilated. The United States struck targets in the Yemeni capital of Sana'a on Wednesday, the latest in a wave of strikes carried out in the retaliation for attacks by the Houthis on shipping routes in the Red Sea. U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to sign an executive order on Thursday that aims to shut down the Department of Education, acting on a key campaign pledge. According to a White House summary, Trump's pending executive order directs Education Secretary Linda McMahon to take all the necessary steps to facilitate her department's closure and return education authority to the states. Even before it was signed, the order was being challenged by a group of Democratic state attorneys general who filed a lawsuit seeking to block Trump from dismantling the department and halt the layoffs of nearly half of its staff announced last week. Senate Democrats have given no sign that they would support the abolishing of the Education Department. Trump has repeatedly called for eliminating the department, calling it a big con job. He proposed shuttering it in his first term as president, but Congress did not act. Last month, Trump said that he wanted the department to be closed immediately, but acknowledged that he would need buy-ins from Congress and teachers' unions. The White House said on Wednesday that it expects to continue its mass deportation of undocumented migrants and fight unfavorable court rulings, but will comply with judicial orders. The White House accused judges of usurping the executive power in its latest broadside against federal courts, whose rulings have gone against President Trump's administration. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt alleged that there had been a concerted effort by the far left to pick judges who were clearly acting as partisan activists to deal with cases involving the Republicans' actions.
President Zelensky asked for additional air defense systems to protect his civilians, particularly Patriot missile systems, and President Trump agreed to work with him to find what was available, particularly in Europe. The two leaders also agreed on a partial ceasefire against energy. Technical teams will meet in Saudi Arabia in the coming days to discuss broadening the ceasefire to the Black Sea on the way to a full ceasefire.
The U.S. judge warns that the Trump administration could face consequences if it violated a judge's order temporarily blocking the deportation of hundreds of Venezuelan migrants. Even the judge gave the government more time to elaborate on the expulsions. Washington-based U.S. District Judge James Boasberg said that the administration could choose to invoke the state secrets doctrine, which protects sensitive national security information from being disclosed in civil litigation, and explained why it was doing so rather than provide details on deportation flights. Caracas residents signed a petition launched by Venezuelan government calling for the release of 238 compatriots. The United States sent a notoriously harsh prison in El Salvador accused of being gang members. In a proclamation published on March 15th, US President Donald Trump invoked the 1798 Alien Enemies Act to swiftly deport what the White House said were members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua. The Trump administration used the authority to deport 137 Venezuelans to El Salvador on Saturday, even as a judge ordered the removals halted, sparking a legal standoff. Thousands of protesters took to the streets of Istanbul on Thursday following the arrest of the city's mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu. The opposition figure is seen as a key rival to President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Hundreds chanted anti-government slogans, with police using pepper spray to disperse protesters when they tried to push their way through a police formation. Several roads had been closed, some social media platforms were restricted, and a 4-day demonstration ban was put into place in an attempt to thwart the protests. However, despite the ban, many gathered outside Istanbul's police headquarters, the city hall, and outside the headquarters of İmamoğlu's Republican People's Party. Turkey seized the construction company co-owned by detained Istanbul Mayor İmamoğlu. In a statement late on Wednesday, the prosecutor's office said that control of İmamoğlu Construction, Trade and Industry was taken over by a criminal court of peace based on the financial crime investigation reports. Meanwhile, EU chief Ursula von der Leyen said on Wednesday that the detention of Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu was deeply concerning.
The arrest of the mayor is deeply concerning. As a Council of Europe member that Turkey is and an EU candidate country, Turkey must uphold the democratic values.
Finland once again tops the World Happiness Report, which was released on Thursday. People in 143 countries and territories are asked to evaluate their life on a scale from 0 to 10, with 10 representing their best possible life. Results from the past 3 years are averaged to create a ranking. Finland remained in the top position for the 8th year with an average score of 7.75, followed by Denmark, Iceland and Sweden. The US fell to 24th place, its lowest ever level in the global rankings, while Afghanistan held the bottom spot with scores of 1.36.
Well, in this year's World Happiness Report, we have Finland again at the very top, and the average life satisfaction in Finland is around 7.75. As people self-report the way their lives are going. That's the very top. So the other Nordic countries follow closely behind Finland, with Denmark and Sweden and Iceland. At the very bottom of the World Happiness Report, we have Afghanistan falling even lower, with an average life satisfaction in the country with now 1.3 out of 10 in the way that people self-rate the way their lives are going.
Pope Francis has suspended the use of an oxygen mask as the clinical condition of the pontiff was improving after more than 1 month in hospital. The Vatican said on Wednesday that the Pope is no longer using mechanical ventilation for help for breathing at night, and his doctors believe that he will continue to improve. The Vatican press office said that Pope Francis' pneumonia has not been eliminated but was under control. Pope Francis has been in Rome's Gemelli Hospital since February 14th, suffering from pneumonia in both the lungs, but the Vatican has reported recent progress after earlier worries that his life could be at risk. The Vatican released the first image of Francis in hospital on Sunday, showing him praying in a chapel. The mysterious and invisible cosmic force known as dark energy has deteriorated over time rather than remaining constant. According to the new data, if dark energy is in fact weakening, it would likely mean that science's understanding of how the universe works will need to be rewritten. The new findings come from the Dark Energy Spectroscopic Instrument, which sits on a telescope at the Kitt Peak National Observatory in the U.S. state of Arizona. The findings announced on Wednesday are part of a years-long study of the history of the cosmos, focusing upon dark energy. This analysis, combined with other astrophysical data, offers mounting evidence that the impact of dark energy may be weakening over time and that the standard model of how the universe works may need to be revised, the researchers said. You're watching DD India Live. We're heading for a short break, but after the break, addressing the 10th CII India-LAC conclave, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar shares vision for stronger India-LAC ties. The second edition of Khelo India Para Games kicks off in the national capital on Thursday. World Sparrow Day is being celebrated globally with the theme, a tribute to nature's tiny messengers. Welcome back. After the break, you're watching DD India Live. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar shared his vision for a stronger India-LAC relationship at the 10th CII India-LAC conclave in New Delhi today. Speaking at the session on the theme Advancing Economic Alliances for Collaborative Growth, Dr. S. Jaishankar said that in the current times of post-COVID era and conflicts, the need of the hour is to de-risk global economy from concentration of power. He thus stressed that focus should be on reliable and resilient supply chains.
Clearly, there is a need to de-risk the global economy from the dangers of over-concentration in any single geography. But we also need to build reliable and resilient supply chains. At the same time, because we have now moved decisively, irrevocably into the digital era, we need to ensure trust and transparency when it comes to selection of partners.
Dr. S. Jaishankar also referred to Prime Minister Narendra Modi's recent visit to Guyana for the India CARICOM summit, saying the potential of the ties with the region lies mainly in trade, technology, tourism, talent and tradition.
Last year, while visiting the LAC region, Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced the development of a portal, partnerindia.org. It would focus on the 5 T's, trade, technology, tourism, talent and tradition. Once developed and boarded, it would be the port of first call for those who are keen to engage with each other. We expect this portal to materialize by the end of the year, and hopefully it would contribute to making this conclave an even smarter deliberation.
India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri delivered a compelling address during the Raisina DPI conclave. His speech underscored India's unwavering commitment to advancing a trusting, secure and inclusive digital public infrastructure, that is DPI, highlighting its transformative role in fostering global cooperation, driving socio-economic progress and scaling India to new heights through its accelerated financial inclusion.
Every month, 16 billion transactions happen through UPI. More than half the electronic payment transactions across the world happen in India alone. The social outcomes that have been unleashed by this digital transformation are even more profound. We saw the benefits of digital public infrastructure in full flow, especially during COVID. Nearly $9.3 billion were deposited in the accounts of 420 million beneficiaries using the direct benefits transfer system. Taken together, Jan Dhan, Aadhaar and mobile are known in India as the JAM Trinity. This represents the world's largest financial inclusion program. 19 countries have entered into agreements and understandings with India on the India stack.
Following Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri's session, Antigua's Foreign Minister Ted Green delivered an insightful address. He lauded India's collaboration on digital public infrastructure, recognizing it as a shining example of South-South cooperation that strengthens the capacities of the Global South.
Antigua and Barbuda envisions deeper engagement with friendly nations, leading technology institutions and like-minded partners who share our common and inclusive ethical innovation. Indeed, in a broader sphere of South-South cooperation, our collaboration with India stands out as a great opportunity. India's remarkable strides in AI and DPI, coupled with its real-world applications in governance, health, agriculture and financial inclusion, offer a pristine blueprint for sustainable progress.
Slovakia says that India, as the voice of Global South, is an important stakeholder in Ukraine peace. Visiting Slovakian Foreign Minister Juraj Blanar spoke exclusively to DD India's Ramesh Ramachandran in New Delhi. Let's listen in.
Finally, everyone understands that this peace should be guaranteed from the superpowers and also from the European Union and also some countries like Global South. This will be contributing to be achieved a long-lasting peace for a future.
Talking about the Global South, Mr. Minister, do you see a scope for India, for instance, to actually play a role in resolving this conflict?
Yeah, sure. India is also a very important stakeholder. We can guarantee some security.
Slovakia acknowledges that closer Russia-China relations is an unintended consequence of the Ukraine conflict.
We understand that they have historical ties, China and Russia. And one of the results of the Ukraine conflict that their cooperation are even closer than before.
Right.
That we wanted to achieve, I think not. And I think that this is very important also to have peace in this Taiwan Strait and not to escalate the situation.
The minister also says that seizing or unfreezing $300 billion worth of Russian assets and using the money to compensate Ukraine or boost its military capabilities is disputable.
There are two things you are talking about, because one is the frozen assets and another one is rearm program which was announced by Madame Ursula von der Leyen. So the frozen asset is very disputable part of support of rearming Ukraine army. So we are very careful with this, but it's something which is on the bilateral level, not on the level of European Union.
Right.
But the second part, it's something else, and we have to really realize that something has changed. After the 80 years of ending the Second World War, when we had strong guarantees from the US side of the security in the Europe, now we have to be more focused on own security, and we have to robust our defense industry.
You can watch this entire interview at 8:30 p.m. IST or 1500 GMT on Thursday. Let's get to business updates. U.S. stocks jumped on Wednesday as the Federal Reserve held interest rates steady after a policy meeting. The U.S. Central Bank's rate decision was widely expected, although it also cut its growth forecast for 2025 and hiked the inflation outlook. Here's a report.
The US Federal Reserve paused interest rate cuts again on Wednesday and warned of increased economic uncertainty as it seeks to navigate an economy unnerved by President Donald Trump's stop-start tariff rollout. Policymakers voted to hold the US Central Bank's key lending rate at between 4.25% and 4.5%. They also cut their growth forecast for the year 2025 and hiked their inflation outlook while still penciling in 2 rate cuts this year, in line with their previous forecast in the month of December. US Fed Chief Jerome Powell said that the risk of recession had risen slightly in recent weeks, but was not yet a cause for concern.
It is going to be very difficult to have a precise assessment of how much of inflation is coming from tariffs and from other, and that's already the case. You may have seen that goods inflation moved up pretty significantly in the first 2 months of the year. Trying to track that back to actual tariff increases, given what was tariffed and what was not, very, very challenging. So some of it, the answer is clearly some of it. A good part of it is coming from tariffs, but we'll be working, and so will other forecasters, to try to find the best possible way to separate non-tariff inflation from tariff inflation.
In an unusual move, Fed Governor Christopher Waller opposed the Fed's rate decision because of his colleagues' support for slowing down the pace at which it is shrinking the balance sheet. Now, US President Donald Trump said the Federal Reserve would be better off cutting rates as US tariffs start to ease their way into the economy. All 3 major Wall Street indices closed higher on the news, while government bond yields fell after the Fed announced it would slow down the rate at which it is reducing its balance sheet, which swelled during the pandemic. Most Asian equities also rose Thursday after US Federal Reserve boss Powell suggested any increase in consumer prices caused by tariffs would likely be short-lived. Anamika Pandey's report for DD India.
In sports news, the second edition of Khelo India Para Games is set to begin in the national capital on Thursday. These games will be held in 6 disciplines, including para-athletics, para-archery and para-badminton. The opening ceremony will be held at Indira Gandhi Stadium on Thursday evening in the presence of over 1,300 athletes and 350 support staff. The tournament will be streamed on the YouTube page of Prasar Bharati Sports and will also be available on live broadcast on Doordarshan channels. From the peaceful mornings in villages to the hustle and bustle of cities, sparrows once filled the air with their cheerful chirps. Flocks of these tiny birds, uninvited yet welcome, created unforgettable memories. To raise awareness and protect these small creatures, World Sparrow Day is celebrated every year on March 20th. Take a look.
Once abundant, the house sparrow is now a rare sight and a mystery in many places. Over time, these little friends have just vanished from our lives. That makes such initiatives all the more important. To raise awareness about the declining sparrow population, the World Sparrow Day was initiated by Nature Forever, a bird conservation organization in 2010. In 2012, the house sparrow became Delhi's state bird. Since then, the event has gained global attention. In India, sparrows are not just birds. They are a symbol of shared history and culture. Yet the declining in numbers continue incessantly. Several factors contribute to this decline. The use of unleaded petrol has led to toxic compounds that harm the insects sparrows depend on for food. Urbanization has also taken away their natural nesting spaces. Pesticide used in agriculture has reduced the number of insects impacting sparrows' food supply. Environmental conservationist Jagat Kinkapwala has emphasized the need to balance development with environmental protection. PM Modi has also highlighted the importance of protecting sparrows in his monthly radio show Man Ki Baat.
हमारे आसपास बायोडायवर्सिटी को बनाए रखने में गोरैया का एक बहुत महत्वपूर्ण योगदान होता है, लेकिन आज शहरों में बड़ी मुश्किल से गोरैया दिखती है। बढ़ते शहरीकरण की वजह से गोरैया हमसे दूर चली गई है। आज की पीढ़ी के ऐसे बहुत से बच्चे हैं जिन्होंने गोरैया को सिर्फ तस्वीरों या वीडियो में देखा है। ऐसे बच्चों के जीवन में इस प्यारी पक्षी की वापसी के लिए कुछ अनोखे प्रयास हो रहे हैं।
Sparrows are small but significant birds that play an essential role in maintaining ecological balance. World Sparrow Day is a reminder of the importance of preserving our tiny feathered friends. Bureau Report, DD India.
All right, on that note, we end this edition of DD India Live, but we'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Preeti Kaur signing off, and from all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Live.